Welcome to Clueless with Ogre and Big Paulie. Welcome to Clueless with Ogre and Big Paulie. How are you, Big Paulie?
Good evening, Ogre. I am well, and I think I've started the same way every episode, absolutely flying up here on the Sunshine Coast and loving life. And again, no barbecue tonight, but shorts and T-shirt is the order of the day.
You must have had a busy period of time because you've sent me no body shots lately. You're down the beach and the water in the background, the blue sky. What's been going on?
Well, I thought you'd get bored with them, Ogre, because every day is the same. It's just wander down to the beach yesterday, but I have got some news, Ogre. I've now entered into the stand-up paddleboard club.
Oh, no.
So I wandered off to BCF the other night, and I had a little voucher from a little job I did one time, and I stood there and I've got my stand-up paddle. I've had my eye on this for a few weeks now, and I finally got there and went to the counter with him, stand-up paddle. Do you reckon I could find the voucher, Ogre? Could not find it anywhere. So I've embarrassed myself and said, listen, excuse me, sir, I'll be back. Just leave this over here. I mean, they've only got 400 left in stock, but I said, just in case you sell out between now and whenever, just leave this over here. So I had to come home and rip the joint apart and Google emails and send her this and send her that. And oh, goodness. But I found it. I went back. And Sunday was my first day on the river, we call it, the locals, with my stand-up paddleboard. Now, I don't know if you've got an hour and a half so I can tell you how it went, Ogre. Probably not, I would think. But, mate, I'm in the club. I'm a stand-up paddleboarder.
Why are you in the river and not in the waves?
Ogre, do you know how hard it is to ride one of the... I mean, I'm a natural. I mean, there's people looking at me, waving at me and all that sort of stuff. And I think I'm a natural, and I was very conscious of my posture and upright. I've watched 4 YouTube videos about how to paddle a stand-up paddle. Mate, it's hard enough. So I get in there and I go, how easy is this? I jump on it and I go downstream, apparently thinking, oh, this is pretty good. I'm pretty good at this. And then I decided to come back. Oh, my goodness, that was a whole nother story, You're against the current, and the waves are lapping on the front of your board. Whew, it took me about 4 times longer to get back to where I started than what it did to get down the river because the tide and the current, Ogre, I didn't know there was a thing. So I was just out there and I was puffing and sweating and all sorts of stuff, and I did fall off once.
Once, you got wet.
Only once. Again, there's another story. I got my little backpack, had my phone and everything in my little backpack there, and you strap that onto the board. And I thought I'd just get in there, and I nearly broke my leg falling off in about the first 10 seconds in the shallows. And I thought, so I took the backpack off. I thought, well, if I'm going in I don't want all that stuff going in the water. So then I just, left that on the sand, and I'm sure no one's stealing it. Hopefully not, anyway.
You've got all the toys. So surely the board does not fit on the top of the roof racks on the Tesla. You're just carrying that over the shoulder as you are rocking down to the river, as they call it.
Just like carrying a slab, Ogre. The board under the arm, and I tell you what, a slab is heavier. These things, this is an inflatable one, these things are fantastic. It was just the hardest thing, Ogre, because I wasn't going in a direct line with the wind. Sometimes the wind would get my board in half and, knock me around a little bit, but I soldiered on. So I'm only a couple hundred metres from the river. So, mate, off I went. Down the river, straight in, over the grass and onto the sand, and off I went.
So you've pumped it up once and you don't have to do it. I've seen people pump them up, they take them down, put them back in the car, go down the beach, pump them up. You pump it up once and you're just under the arm.
I will never pump this thing up again. But interesting you say that. These pumps that come with it, Ogre, they are really good. Like, sometimes I used to pump footies up and it used to take about 4 hours to pump a footy up or a basketball up. This thing, it took me 12 minutes. I timed it. I started at 8:48 a.m. and I went and I had it up and running by about 9:02, and that included a bit of a rest because you're doing double pumping and then you're starting to get a bit of a sweat up. You're a bit heavy in the breath, and the thing doesn't register until it gets to 5 psi, and you can only go to 15 psi, and thank goodness the last 10 psi was shorter than the first PSI. It's a bit like the Tesla, it goes mad anyway. So, no, it's now found a little spot in the underground car park where my little stand-up paddle lives, and I'm just waiting for the owner's corp to tell me I can't put it there, and then I don't know what I'm going to do. But for now, that's where it goes, and I'm in the club.
It sounds like those bird dog exercises are working out for you, Big Paulie. But it is time to bring on our guest this week, Big Paulie, and a little bit excited about our next guest. And I'd like to welcome to the Clueless Show, Ian Prendergast.
Evening, gents. How are we? Nice to be with you.
Now, our listeners don't know that we've tried this a few times. We've had a few illnesses, busyness, technical difficulties, but here we are for our take 4. And the special, we're on our 8th episode, Big Paulie, and it's our first guest who has his own Wikipedia page, which made research pretty easy, but pretty fancy, that Wikipedia page, Ian. You had much to do with that yourself?
Yeah, drafted it all myself, so hopefully it reads well. Update it regularly. I'm not sure who creates those, but it did have a photo of Matthew Pavlich on it rather than me recently. Someone alerted me to, so I'll take that.
Well, I'll take that. Matthew Pavlich is considered to be a very, very good-looking man, so I think you should take that and run, Ian. And not to say that you're not a good-looking man, but if the comparison is there, I'd be taking that every day of the week.
Now, for our listeners, they might be going, who the hell is Ian Prendergast? So we'll just quickly overview of the resume, which we will cover in depth during the episode.
Don't worry, Ogre. They're not worried about who Ian Prendergast is. They're worried about who the hell is Ogre and Big Paulie. But if you don't know us by now, well, I'm sure you can Google us or Wikipedia us as well. But yes, let's find out a little bit more about Ian Prendergast.
So, AFL player. Well, you're always an AFL player. Can you say ex-AFL player, Ian?
Yeah, I guess you can say what you want. I'm both ex-AFL player now. Yeah.
Ex-AFL player. He was a bit of a journeyman, which we'll cover off. He got heavily involved in player delegation, players associations in the AFL, in the Sandful, in rugby league. Was also continued on working as a chief commercial officer and general counsel at Carlton. Also a lawyer, Big Paulie. And currently, who's got to get to my notes, is running an organisation called Sports Advisory Partners as an exec director, and they help out a lot of sports organisations in doing whatever they need to do at the time. Ian, I don't know how we're going to squeeze all this in, but let's start with AFL.
That is a massive, massive introduction. I don't think we're supposed to try and limit this to an hour. We could be here for 4 days if we covered off all those things. That is a huge introduction, and I am intrigued, Ian, about your background, and footy seems to be just like a little part of it from what I can gather.
There's a classic utility. Ian, I'll just give you a classic utility. Played on the wing, the forward, the back, and the ruck. 6'4", would have been a giant ruckman back in the day. Number 28, 65 games, 14 goals for the Blue Baggers, who may or not been that good at the time. Ian, let you talk.
It's funny listening to you talk through all of that, because I still consider myself just a kid from the country.
That is a fair resume too, by the way.
Yeah, no, thank you, gents. I appreciate that.
I don't think I'm going to get a chance to talk about myself in all this.
Bet you'll find a way.
I actually didn't think I didn't think I'd be a footballer, interestingly enough. So, yeah, it's funny. I grew up in a small country town called Kerrang, running. So I didn't play football until I was 16. I used to run cross-country over the winter. Thought I'd run at the Olympics for Australia, 800, 1,500 metres over the summer. So that was my sport. I only played one season of football in Kerrang for fun with my mates, under 17s. We won the premiership, discovered drinking, girls, best year of my life to this date, and there was no looking back. But we moved to Melbourne as a family because we were spending a lot of time travelling to Bendigo or Melbourne with my sport, and 2 younger sisters who played a lot of sport as well, particularly netball. And that's why I tried to combine the two. I played a season with Oakley Chargers in the under-18s. Vic Metro didn't want me, so I actually played Vic Country that year with the likes of Adam Goods and Cameron Ling and Chris Tarrant. So it was a good side. But I then missed a whole year of both football and my athletics because my groin fell apart. Back then, they used to call it osteitis pubis. You don't hear about it much anymore, but I actually had it operated on. And it was bedridden. Thought that was the end of both my athletic and AFL dreams, but got invited to the draft camp, as they had back then. I think they call it the combine these days, because I'd ran a 17.3 beep test, and it was back when they were trying to teach athletes how to play football. So I actually got drafted based on my athleticism, and I'd have a crack, but my first coach, David Parkin, described me as the most stupid, courageous player he coached because I didn't really know how to protect myself. And it was a very experienced team that I joined at Carlton in '99. It was the 95 premiership era that was continuing to be successful through 2000, 2001, my first couple of years. So it was difficult to crack into the senior side. Plus I was always injured or out of form. So that made it even more difficult. And they actually delisted me after my second year because I had so many injuries and gave me an opportunity on a rookie list. So I got paid $12,000 in my third year, and unfortunately cracked the seniors towards the end of 2001 and played the last 8 games.
Now, just going back a second, if we can, Ian, you mentioned growing up you found women and alcohol and that sort of stuff. And it reminds me of the great Georgie Best, who was a fantastic soccer player. I think at the end of his career, he once said that he spent all his money on women, drugs and alcohol and just wasted the rest. Now, with your athletic ability, how close did you get to representing Australia, going to the Olympics, and was it a hard decision or was it made for you?
I was successful through the junior years. From about 12, 13, 14, I became state and then national champion of 800, 1500 cross country. So my claim to fame.
Are we talking Craig Mottram territory? Is that the same era?
I was just about to say that. Craig was actually in my age group, and my claim to fame is that I had him covered during the juniors. He then went out of the sport to do triathlon. So I sort of drove him out of the sport, and then I started playing
I didn't
football,
know that either.
and he came back in and then obviously dominated as one of the best middle distance runners we've seen, and then I played football and was just another pair of boots running around out there. So it's fair to say his career kicked on a little bit more than mine did from there.
Well, it sounds like he went back once you'd left the scene to take over again. Less competition. Big Paulie.
So how did he get so good so quickly after he'd left the sport? Was anything that happened to him, or did he train harder, better, or anything like that? Or
he grew a bit. He was a short ass when we were training, but he was always really talented. We had some good runners back then in our year levels for like little ass and school athletics. So there was a lot of competition. Plenty of them actually went on to play AFL. So I actually borrowed Trent Crode's spikes to run in my first national final over in Adelaide one year when I was first starting. David Clark I played with at Carlton, who ended up at Geelong. His brother Tim Clark was at Hawthorn. They were both good runners. Spriggsy, who ended up at Geelong, David Spriggs. So yeah, there was plenty of us sort of getting around doing athletics who chose football, and back then it was probably a better option because there was more opportunities to make a living out of it at the elite level, which was one of the reasons I decided to try and pursue football after we moved to Melbourne.
And was that the era, do you think, that was where they actually started to choose athletes as opposed to footballers? There was that transition period where if you could run, they'd give you a game? Well, I think it's turned a little bit now, as we've seen.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the players are quite athletic these days because of the training and develop they get through those pathways. So I guess Kuda sort of set the scene for sport or AFL trying to recruit athletes and teach them how to play the game. There's a coach called Barry Mitchell who I had at Carlton. He really helped Kuda understand the decision making around playing AFL. I unfortunately latched onto Mitchell a little bit late in my time at Carlton, and he taught me a lot. But by that stage, Dennis Pagan had taken over as coach, and initially I was in favour with Dennis, and then I wasn't, and then we sort of we got shut out of the draft due to salary cap breaches, and we brought the replacement players in, and then he ran with a youth policy. And I think it was towards the end of my time at Carlton when I'd finally learnt the game and sort of understood what was required to be successful, that we were 24, 25, a lot of us guys playing the twos, but we weren't seen to be in the next premiership window for Carlton, so we weren't getting an opportunity. But just going back, if I could, for the first training session, I'll never forget. These days, because I've missed a whole year of everything, they probably would have put me through an extended conditioning program, but straight into these drills with the likes of Silvani and Bradley and Koutafidis and Rice and Sexton, and the names were the really high profile players, and I remember basically kicking it off my shin at right angles instead of hitting targets and handballing it back to them apologetically. And at the end of this training session, Shane O'Sullivan was there, the recruitment manager, and Fraser Brown, who was a bit of an enforcer within the group, said, "Shano, it's a effing football club. You need to be able to kick the football." And I knew he was talking about me, so that was essentially my welcome to the Carlton Football Club.
So you drafted in the 1998 AFL draft, pick number 58. Some of the names that were done there, we had Des Headland, number 1, just helping Paulie out with his mind mapping of which other players. Mm-hmm. Justin Longmuir, number 2, currently coach of Freo. Number 3, Nick Fosdyke. Brian Fitzgerald.
Are we going to go through all 58 here, Oga?
No, shut up. We could.
I'd like that.
Michael Stevens, Murray Vance, Josh Carr, Jude Bolden, Mark McVeigh, and Brandon Hill, rounding out the top 10. We also had Lenny Hayes and Adam Ramanauskas.
Who the hell is Brandon Hill?
I don't know, didn't kick on. But then the very interesting number 38, also drafted to Carlton, was the Big Fev, Brendan Favola. The same year. You must have been tight walking in there to get a pick 38 and 58.
He was still at school, Feb. So he would have been the most talented player who I had the pleasure of playing with in terms of his speed, his strength, his marking ability, how clean his kicks were, obviously his goal sense. But he'd admit himself he was pretty immature when he got drafted. So, we'd spent a fair bit of time together. There's plenty of occasions where I sort of dodged a bullet and Fev took one for the situations that we may have found ourselves in. But
what number did you wear in those days? What number were you?
I wore 28.
And what number was Fev? He was
25, just like
so close. So. Just a couple up the road on the lockers.
Yeah, they sort of gave you the jumper number in order of where you got drafted. So, Murray Vance was number 6 and got drafted number 6, I think. But he was a fella from Shep. You're always close with the kids you get drafted with because you go through a fair bit, and it was a tough culture down there. So I felt like you couldn't really talk for the first couple of years after you were drafted. It's very different these days.
So there was 91 picks that year, so you're sort of in the mid-range. Well done. And then, so again, that must have been exciting, like to be drafted. I mean, we a lot of kids are trying to go into that program now, and it's nearly the impossible dream. And I still think getting drafted is nearly the easy part. Getting a game's the hard part, but getting drafted is near on impossible. How'd you feel when your name got called out? Did you know? Was it a surprise?
I had a sense because you talked to clubs in the lead up. Shane O'Sullivan, who I mentioned, came to interview me at my home after, we hadn't been living in Melbourne long. So even that experience was quite daunting. And he tells the story about catching up with myself and my parents and talking about the fact that they were interested in drafting me. And he sent me a text, or we spoke after I got drafted, and he said, might be time to remove those Essendon car seat covers from your car that I had on when he visited us. So I was a big Essendon fan growing up, but to get drafted to a Melbourne club was a bit of a bonus because you could stay around home and your friends and family. But you quickly become a Carlton person. 99 was my first year where we actually beat Essendon in that famous
prelim final.
Yeah, and I saw all the past players crying in the stands. I wasn't playing because I didn't get a game for a couple of years. But that's when it dawned on me I'm actually a Carlton person. Yeah, so.
Did they have any, these days you hear all sorts of stories when kids get drafted there, the combine, they go to the camp and all that sort of stuff, and they lock them in a room and ask them all sorts of stupid questions. Did any come across your desk when they were interviewing you pre-draft?
Oh, I remember Kevin Sheedy was interesting. I obviously was a fan of Sheeds because I was an Essendon supporter, but I couldn't even understand some of the questions he was asking or why he was asking them. So I couldn't repeat them now because I can't remember them. But I do recall feeling a bit sort of miffed as to what he wanted me to say at certain times. So that was interesting.
If you just had have said Bella Spree for the great Kevin Sheedy, you might have been okay. For those who know, they know. Okay.
So we get to the first game. You have to wait until your third year coming off the rookie list. Round 17, 2001 against the Hawks at the G. What do you remember? What about the crowd? Was it humongous?
It was a big crowd, played Hawthorn. It was a famous game. It's often played on Fox footy. It's the one where Dixon kicked the goal after the siren. It was a bit of a thriller. It's 2001, and they had a stacked side. We had a great side. I was texting Daniel Harford earlier. He was actually playing for the Hawks, and we ended up playing together at Carlton, mainly for the Bull Ants, and the Bull Ants have just been wound up. So
they have.
That's a bit of a shame. We used to joke about going down to Preston, where they're based, if you didn't get a game in the ones, but we actually really enjoyed
Kramer Street Oval, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's where Barry Mitchell was coaching us in the twos in that last year I had at Carlton, which was actually really good fun because all of us older guys realised that we were getting moved on, so we just enjoyed the time that we had left. But Half and I became quite close, and I actually was assistant coach with him at Baldwin locally after playing 2 years at South Adelaide when I finished at Carlton, and then coming back and playing with him. But in this first game, I ran on, and I was very excited, come off the bench. I reckon I was on there for about a minute, pushed off half, and my little finger got caught in his jumper, and I had a compound dislocation. It popped out of the skin. And so I'm looking down, and it's at right angles. And I remember showing it to a couple of teammates who then told me that I probably should get off the ground. So I went.
He wasn't wearing a lace-up, was he?
No, not a lace-up. I don't know how it happened. It just happened so quickly. It was just typical of my luck throughout my career with injuries. So I had to go to the hospital. They x-rayed it, no break. They stitched it up, and the doc said, "You'll miss a couple of weeks." And I thought, that's it. I'll never play again. Went back to the ground, still had my full kit on. And we had a number of injuries that game. I think Ricey, Andrew McKay, maybe. Anyway, so Wayne Britton, who was the match day coach at that point, had taken over from Parkin. He said, "Is it broken?" I said, "No." He said, "How's it feel?" I said, "I can't feel it. It's got local in it." He goes, "Good. Put a glove on, strap it up. We need you." So at 3/4 time, they were kicking the footy into my hands. I played the last quarter and got a fair few touches because I was fresh as a daisy. Kicked most of them back to the opposition, but got a month.
Off his shin.
I actually hit more targets than I usually do. So performed okay, and then Dicko took the mark. Siren went. He kicks the goal. You know, every one of us on the mark trying to put him off, and it kind of summed up my career. In the end, it was it was a bit of a roller coaster, that game.
It sounds like exciting and a great story for life. Unfortunately, not the result that you were after. Now it says on the wiki page, it says one of the highlights of your career was winning the preseason premiership when they were a thing in 2005. Now I do have, and there was a highlight in this game of you kicking a 9-point super goal in the last quarter that ended up separating the two teams. So two questions here. One, does the preseason, it's like 5-time day, 5-time night premiership player, like, please, come on. Yeah. How do you feel about that's been the highlight of your career on your wiki page, and then the 9-point super goal?
I think it's a sad state of affairs that's the highlight of my career, but it's probably pretty close. We had a packed stadium at Docklands Stadium. We were playing West Coast, who had a gun team. And there was a fair bit of optimism around Carlton and the group that we had under Pagan.
There's been optimism around Carlton for about 30 years, so nothing's changed by the sounds of it.
This is pre-season. Yeah, that's right. Well, everyone got on board because it was unbelievable atmosphere. I think there was a fair bit of money attached to it, and because we were struggling financially, it kind of meant something at the time. Anyway, we got the win. I somehow kicked that goal, and I thought it was with 30 seconds to go in my mind, but I've since found it on YouTube, and it was actually with a few minutes to go. So we could call it the sealer, but it wasn't like it was on the final siren. But it did help clinch the win, and Eddie Maguire's commentary is quite funny. When it spills out of the pack, I kick it from, I say 60 metres, but it was probably about 55 metres, straight through. His commentary was Prendergast, of all people. So
The underdog.
sums up the likelihood of me nailing it.
So refresh my
The
memories.
the 9 pointers outside 50 metres. Is that right?
Outside 50.
At the time.
Thank you, Ogre. I was going to ask for the football aficionados. I don't remember that rule. So would it be fair to say you're on a par with Kerry Good in that goal after the siren when North Melbourne won the start of the season game? Remember that, Ogre? Kerry Good kicked it.
I do.
Yes, after the siren, I think it was. So we're an elite company
Mate, I
here.
thought you would have been all over the pre-season competition because that's the only thing the Kangaroos used to win because they wanted the cash money. You're going to come back to 96 and 99, aren't you?
Correct. Now that's a whole other story. I've got a few stories about those days and 97 when I flew from Tathra down to the AFL Grand Final, and oh golly,
we celebrated, Ogo, like we'd won the actual grand final for a few days.
Did the contract have a little cash rider in it?
Nothing in mind. No bonus, and certainly no paper bags before we got done for salary cap breaches. But I still had to take a 10% pay cut, 10% of stuff all. But we went on to win the wooden spoon that year, and West Coast went on to make the grand final. So didn't play out very well from that point.
Maybe they didn't celebrate as hard.
So talking about money, Ian, as we were, how do you feel about the money these days in AFL footy? I mean, you played 65 games and you joke and laugh, but I mean, that's a fantastic effort, 65 games at that level. That's awesome. And you see blokes running around these days who are, first-year players, haven't played and are getting, pretty big money, in the scheme of things, $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 a year. And I'm thinking going back to 1999 and beyond, we're talking like, a couple of bucks and a free slab or something. Is that about how it worked?
We did a little bit better than that. It was the start of the professional era. We're lucky we had a coach, David Parkin, who sort of bucked the trend and really supported us to do something outside of footy that we're passionate about. And I think that's still important to this day in terms of that holistic support of the athlete as a person, not just a footballer. So he was responsible for helping me get into study law. I didn't actually have the marks, and I didn't do very well with my career in terms of my payments, but it really set me up for life because of the opportunities that it affords you and the relationships you build. And I'm lucky that now I still get to work in roles that I'm really passionate about because I had a coach who cared about us in that way. And I think if you look at what the players earn these days, it's eye-watering. It's pretty extreme money, but it is also relative to how the industry has grown and how much money the players help generate. But I think that the basic principle still applies around the environment and empowering your people and making sure that you're getting the most out of them individually and collectively. So that spirit of what it takes to be successful is still there. But yeah, this is a silly season at the moment with the trade period and the amount of interest that it generates around player movement, and the role that the agents play in that is pretty significant as well.
And your post-career, you got heavily involved in players' associations. You would have been a bit of question. Were you a bit of a driving force that the players did get a significant piece of the pie?
Yeah, I guess I became quite passionate about player rights when I was at Carlton. Glenn Manton was our delegate, and he asked for someone to take over from him, and everyone else stepped backwards, and I was the only fella standing there, so he gave me the responsibility. And I didn't have a profile, but I was quite interested in the space. So I got to go along to all these delegates meetings with stars of the game, hearing about how the industry was evolving and the Players Association's role in that and what they considered fair for the players. So it was interesting. And I guess that's what allowed me to look at the industry a little bit differently, because it is, like we say, players are overpaid, but they get a share of the revenue, and it's quite a modest share compared to sports overseas. So, I think they deserve everything they get.
So
because they're the main drivers of the actual product itself.
You will not get any arguments from this side of the fence, I tell you, Ian. So it's fair to say you were the modern day Patrick Dangerfield of player progression and player payments and player welfare. Is that fair to say?
I probably came into that space more after I left Carlton. So I was just another delegate. I wasn't on the Players Association board. I was a representative on the Agent Accreditation Committee, so that was interesting as they first introduced a scheme to regulate agents in the AFL. And then I studied law, as you said. I graduated the year I got the flick, so that worked out well from a timing point of view. And then when I was over in Adelaide playing in the SANFL, it became pretty obvious to me that the players needed a voice. So I actually worked for a fellow called Greg Griffin, he's a real advocate in sport, like from a legal point of view, and I worked at his law firm, and he allowed me to set up the Players Association in the SANFL. So over the course of the 2 years we were there, we registered as an association, we got reps from all of the clubs. I think they paid a bit of a sign-on fee and had everyone on board. Couple of meetings with the league, and it was, from my point of view, it was more around just making sure that their time was protected, because they're all studying or working, and the demands were just ever increasing, and the pay wasn't keeping pace. So that was kind of the motivation, but it fell over when I moved back to Melbourne, unfortunately. But now it's kind of risen from the ashes again. And one of our clients in the sports business that we run is the SANFL, and I'm on the other side of that, giving them advice on how to deal with them. So it's interesting. It's gone full circle.
So you were in the SANFL Players Association. You then came back to the AFL as the GM of Player Relations for a number of years. And then you moved to Sydney and became the CEO of the Rugby League Players Association. So you've been across, and that was for another 5 or 6 years. So you would see that, were there any differences between AFL and NRL? Was it the same sort of theory that the players just weren't getting enough recognition for what they were bringing to the actual game itself?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to get that general manager role at the AFLPA. I had a good relationship with Matt Finnis, who took over from Brendan Gale when he vacated the CEO role and went to Richmond. And so they were looking for someone to backfill the role that Matt played. But I was up against some really high-profile, more experienced people, and somehow managed to snag it. I pretty much had a panic attack when I was presenting to the board, and they gave it to me despite that. So I was really grateful for that opportunity, and it was a steep learning curve, but I think they saw how passionate I was, that I had that connection with the playing group, and I was able to get them on board with the importance of the association and the role it played to protect and advance their interests, which is probably the main legacy piece that I'm proud of during my time at the AFLPA, was that the players became really engaged, and we set up a lot of structure around how we were able to do that, not only with them, but all of the key stakeholders within the sport, to try and influence the positive changes that we believe needed to occur. And that's the advocacy piece that I'm really passionate about. But it's not just about players getting paid more. You actually care about growing the game and what's in the best interest of it longer term. So and it's a great apprenticeship as a young lawyer who's moving into sports admin and leadership, because you meet with all of the clubs twice a year, from the CEO to the head of football to the player development manager to the coaches to the entire playing group. So you gather those insights from across the board. So I missed out on the CEO role to Paul Marsh after I'd been there 5 years. Paul Marsh came across from the Cricket Association. He's now gone back there after serving a really decent stint as CEO of the AFLPA. And so I worked with him for 12 months, and then an opportunity came up in the NRL to run their Players Association. So despite not knowing much about the NRL, I ended up taking that opportunity and really enjoyed it, because a lot of the principles are the same around how you run the association, but they're very different sports.
Well, you're not
Totally.
you're not on your own about not knowing much about the NRL. The grand final was just a couple of weeks ago, and up in Queensland, everyone's talking about the Broncos and all this sort of stuff. And anyway, this is before the grand final. This was one of the preliminary final, whatever it was. And I knew it was on, but I had very, very little interest. But I thought, I got to about 4:00 and I thought, I wonder what's going on in that game. So I Googled, the NRL preliminary final, and it said the scores were 14-12 with 78 minutes gone. And I thought, how long do they play? I've got no idea. So I had to Google how long is an NRL game, and I found out it was 80 minutes. So I came inside and saw the last 20 seconds of the preliminary final. But, hey, it's a credit to you, Ian, from what you've done, obviously, in the precursor to footy management and that, because the AFL Players Association now is a very, very powerful beast.
Yeah, it's come a long way. They're well resourced, and they have a significant say within the industry in terms of the direction it's heading in, and they do well to help represent the interests of their members. But the NRL, they didn't have the same level of influence or standing. So one of the main priorities when I took that role was to develop a professional organisation that could work in partnership with the game. So I was fortunate that Todd Greenberg, who was CEO at the time, he really bought into that philosophy, as did John Grant, who was chair of their commission. And they invested in building out our capabilities. They actually gave us funding for me to go and recruit people, which I was able to do. And we got organised quite quickly, and they decided they didn't like the influence we were having. So the relationship became a little bit more adversarial after that. But it was good fun all the same, and we achieved some great things up there during my time. But very different sports, just in terms of the philosophy, the background, how they've evolved, and even the business models. The NRL relies very heavily on broadcast, and it's very much a TV sport, and state of origin is a massive cash cow, whereas if you look at the AFL attendance and membership and sponsorship, they certainly do really well in those areas, and the NRL is probably improving in some of those areas as well. So it was interesting, but enjoyed my time up there before returning to Carlton.
And a bit of controversy at the end when you had said you had a new gig at Carlton, but had still 6 months to finish out, and there was a bit of a lot of articles I read where we want him out, we want him gone, but you were quite settled in finishing off what you needed to do for that year.
Yeah, I wanted to see out what I committed to delivering up there. So fortunately, Carlton agreed to a 6-month transition period that allowed me to do that. But it was quite niggly towards the end of my time, and they used that, the NRL, to try and, compromise my ability to properly lead the Players Association and question whether I was conflicted, which I thought was pretty amusing at the time, considering Peter Vlandis, who was on the commission, I think maybe he'd just taken over as chair of the NRL, was also CEO of New South Wales Racing. So I would have thought that was a bigger conflict than me going to an AFL club.
So in regards to the players and the current and even past players, I mean, there's a lot of sort of conversation we have with the players' associations, whether it be their personal development and investment, particularly when they're all of a sudden holding large chunk of money they may never have had before, particularly when they're starting, career development. But there's a lot of other issues that can come with going from virtually being unknown to them being recognisable, whether it be their life skills, their accountability, their mental health, and even some of outside influences, whether it be gambling and drugs. What do you see as the biggest challenge for a new player that gets drafted? And I'm not necessarily talking about pick number one either. It might be the last bloke picked.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the things you've outlined there highlight what I was alluding to earlier in part. in relation to the difference between the AFL and how the industry's evolved, particularly around how it supports its athletes holistically in those areas compared to the NRL. And the NRL are making huge progress in terms of the support systems that they have in place, but it's also really necessary because in the NRL, I think it was almost 50% of the players that had come from Pacifica background. It is a different demographic that play the sport, and they're expected to be demons on the field and sort of angels off it, which doesn't follow. So we're at odds with the NRL around how you shift player behaviour because there was a lot of integrity issues while I was up there. Our view was you have to invest upfront in them as people and get them to better understand who they are and why they're making these decisions so that they can self-regulate, whereas the NRL seemed more focused on rules, regs, policies and sort of controls, and particularly getting the stick out and whacking them over the head when they did do something wrong. But obviously then the damage is done. So I think the AFL is fortunate that the pathways and the systems that they come through prepare them really well for what's expected of professional athletes and sort of coping with those demands. But they still have a lot of players who are going to struggle. I think the biggest challenge these days is just the level of scrutiny around your role as a professional athlete. If you look at all the media coverage, the social media commentary, it was bad enough listening to talkback radio on the way home after playing back in my day or copying it from over the fence. But there's no escaping it these days. It's 24/7.
So that's a good question into the current day, and I bring back to an AFL focus because that's our genuine interest. Jamara Ugle-Hagan. So what do we do with him? Obviously an elite talent, super player, showing that week in, week out. Absolutely from afar, and you say this with respect because you don't know the story, absolutely off the rails and questionable activities, questionable dealing with people of ill repute perhaps. What do you do with him as a footy club manager, as a CEO or as an AFLPA lead? Where does he go to from here and what do you do to help him?
Yeah, it's a good question in relation to the players who are really struggling to show up and commit to the professional standards required to be an athlete these days. And it's not just the AFL, but obviously there's a lot of focus around that sport. And I don't know. I don't know about Jamara's.
I use that as an example, as an example only. So from me as a middle-aged stand-up paddleboarder, I say, mate, get stuffed, pull your head in, stop being a dickhead, stop taking everybody's money, and go play footy to the best of your ability, and that's what we all want to see. But obviously, it's a lot more detailed than that. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, it's not as simple as that.
Yeah.
I think that's right. It's easy to have that attitude, but unless you know that what's driving the mindset that they're in and the challenges that they're facing, it's difficult to be too critical. In my experience, it's really about that sense of purpose and understanding all the different areas of your life that you need in order to be able to perform at your best, and that's what the advocacy focused on at the AFLPA. We did a lot of research, and what it showed was that the 24/7 footballers, they were more likely to find themselves in compromised positions off field, and they were more likely to struggle from like mental health issues and cope it, as well as less likely to become leaders and to have longevity in the sport. But often they're the most talented as well, these players. So if you can work with them and then they start to mature, you'll get the return on that investment. And we've seen that in so many instances in the AFL. That I don't have to mention them, but you can imagine some of the players that I worked with at the AFLPA, particularly around the illicit drugs policy or integrity-related issues or financial sort of problems that they were facing. They ended up becoming superstars of the competition because people were prepared to support them and help them deal with those issues.
And it's pretty hard when they come from reasonable obscurity, even though they might be highlighted as potentials and top 10s or top 5s or number 1s. But overnight, they've still 18 or 19 or whatever age they may be if they're mature age, and then here you go. Here's some money that you've never had before and you may never ever have in the future either. So I think there's challenges around that, and we just think, just go and play footy.
Yeah.
Just go and play footy. And the actual game of footy and the training, even though you say 24/7 and their whole life has got to be around it, but the actual game of footy itself is for a couple of hours a week, even though the preparation is massive. We're talking about a lot of players' associations and the player support and all that. You mentioned before, Ian, that there was sort of just that player agency coming in, and you were managed by one of the greats in Ronnie Joseph. He was always seemed to be interested in the player welfare that he managed, and not so much after the buck himself.
Yeah, spot on. I was actually really fortunate to be managed by Ron. He wasn't taking on any players at the time, but I played with Lukey Power, and there's a fellow named Chris Pawsey. I actually bumped into him yesterday. We went to school together. His old man Ray was quite influential, and they talked to Ron about managing me, and he agreed to take me on. Certainly didn't make much money out of me. He didn't charge me for the first couple of years. I didn't earn enough money for him to do well out of that. But he helped me with David Parkin get into study law, and he set me up to discuss that with Peter Bell at the time, who was also studying law, and Ron managed Belly. And he ruffled a lot of feathers in his time, Ron. He was a power broker, and he was very influential, massive North man. He was really old school. I remember he used to keep the footy records. I don't know whether it was from the years or the games that you played. He'd put them in these leather binders and give them to you each year. And we'd go once a year to Vlado's restaurant in Richmond and have the steak. And they just had these little traditions, which I loved. And I really value the support he provided me, but it was more about checking in with how I'm going personally and how's the family going, a little bit about football. And I went to his funeral, and I walked in, turned left, saw Brett Moyle, who I played with at Oakley Chargers as well, who he managed, and sat down next to Brett, and Peter Bell was sitting right next to me. So that was a nice moment to sit there at his funeral with Belly and sort of reflect on how he'd helped us through our careers and life. Good man.
Well, I was also at Ronnie's funeral, and I remember I think a story came up, and I'm not sure with I think it was Johnny Longmire. He was up from Albury, and Ron drove up there in his brand new car. And part of the deal, trying to sign him up, and I think he's 16 at the time. They're out for some Chinese. They're trying to do the deal, and I think in the end he threw the keys over the table, and that was the key to the signing. And I think Longmire said, he goes, I was only 16, but I may have driven home that night. So that's one of those things. Yeah. I don't think Ron didn't even know how he was getting home from Albury, but just happy to give his car away. He was a great man, Ronnie.
He was very generous.
But he did ruffle.
Very generous.
He did ruffle a few feathers. I think nearly every restaurant he went to or any pub he went to, he might have created an enemy, but he wasn't never one to a backward step and giving some feedback. Sorry, Big Paulie.
Oh, from a North Melbourne point of view, we thank the great late Ron Joseph. It was a fantastic investment. Johnny Longmire being a club champion, and I think it might have been Wayne Carey on the same serviette, perhaps, or was that a little bit later? I can't remember now. But
I think it was different, but yeah, he certainly found them, and as you describe, Ian, in that he gets involved and he's asking you about your family, and I think he was really interested in that too, and making sure that there was a family unit or what they needed and all that sort of stuff. And he's heavily involved in getting the Cracker Boys over and all those sort of things, and providing them support well beyond their careers as well. I do want to come back to your family, but I'm going to finish on that. But I want to jump into what you're doing currently. So everything you've sort of described, from playing football, your legal background, and then your players' association, at Carlton at a club level, and the Sandful, and then at AFLPA, and then the rugby league as well. You've now set up a new organisation. I said, let me know if I get this right. Sports Advisory Partners. Is it Australia at the end of it, or just the Sports Advisory Partners?
Australia at the end of it. Yeah, we'll take over Australia.
Okay. So not international.
Why limit yourself to Australia, Ian? It sounds like you are going places and going to take on the world.
yeah, let's see.
So just I'll get you to explain it, but through yourselves and your other crew at the organisation, lived experience, 360 vision, and obviously a very extensive network. Andrew Demetriou is involved, which you might have had some involvement with through the AFLPA years. But your sports organisations or clubs, and you've had some work so far with supercars. Some basketball, the Basketball Victory, Netball Australia, Adelaide United, A-League and Golf Australia, if not more there. So you explain what's sort of happening with the current organisation today?
Yeah, thanks. I got it. It's a sports advisory firm. We're set up as a practicing law firm, but we also work with sporting organisations across strategy and commercial growth, as well as some leadership and culture work that we're doing. So I think we've found a bit of a niche in the industry where we help sports on an outsourced basis provide services that assist them to build out their operational capacity or to deliver on a strategic objective. But we're really practical and commercial in the way we go about it because we've all worked in sport over the years. So we understand the challenges they're facing and the different forces at play. So it's going really well. I love it. It allows me to work with people who I want to be, working with. We're adding a lot of value within the industry. We've mainly got retainer clients, so we've got that recurring revenue coming in, which allows us to continue to build out our resources. So there's 9 of us now. Started off as a couple of us 2-3 years ago. And we're doing work from high-level strategy work like that strategic vision project for supercars to the A-League's legal work and helping them with collective bargaining and the broadcast deal, negotiated the deal for the Diamonds and the Suncorp Super Netballers. We do a lot of work in football, in soccer, because my business partner, Sam Chadwick, was general manager of the A-Leagues during the Lowy era and general manager of AFL New South Wales, ACT. So we do work for clubs as well as some of the states, Football South Australia, Football West, Football Northern New South Wales. But it's growing. We're running an executive development program for the AFL, which is about emerging general managers of football and helping them with Jeff Walsh and Trevor Nisbet as our mentors and leaders of industries helping deliver those modules. So there's a lot of variety. It's a bit of a juggling act at times, but it's heading in the right direction.
So that's their big names, huge names and big industries and multi-million dollar stuff. If I was the incoming chairman of Maroochydore Football Club, can you and your organisation, this is just bringing it back to the people, those people, listeners out there, involved in local footy clubs. If I am the Maroochydore Footy Club president, I'm not, but maybe one day, can you help grassroots footy or grassroots clubs?
Yeah, we can.
Pro bono.
Yeah, for the right price.
No retainer here. No retainer.
Some of the local sporting organisations are doing all right for themselves, but we're trying to develop product offerings that will assist community-level sport, whether it's a strategic plan framework or a governance review that you can conduct yourself where it enables you to improve and evolve. We've done governance reviews for the Warragul Basketball Association or ACT Masters, and we've helped with bits and pieces where there might be a need and they're prepared to invest in our services. But we are pretty commercial and pretty flexible around how we price the engagements that we secure. So we work with national sporting organisations, state sporting organisations, leagues, clubs, all the way down to some of the community sports. But
paid with a pot and palmer.
Yeah, that's right. It is a challenge, though, for community sport because the volunteers and the minimum standards that are now expected and the amount of time and energy that they're required to put into running some of those organisations is significant.
So you mentioned earlier, Ian, when you were younger, there's a lot of travel when you were in Kerrang and a lot of travel around and doing your sporting activity. You threw in your sisters there and just, they based a little bit of netball. But 2 sisters you have, yep. Julie and Karen, yep. Yeah? So how's this big Paul? He didn't touch on it. He wasn't giving them anything. But his sister Julie played netball for the Australian Diamonds, and also a little bit of a stint at New South Wales, or the Sydney Swifts and the Vixens. And Karen was also a Vic State netballer. Did not get a mention, Big Paul. Did you notice that?
Well, I did, and now you say it, and I'm not a big netball aficionado, but I actually the Prendergast surname does ring a bell at the elite Australian level. So hey, but it's not about them; it's about Ian today. Well, we might get them on next Ogo.
Yeah, she can be your next guest. Yeah, Karen's probably better value than the two of us put together. She's a ripper, and she did really well for herself with her sport and successful in property these days. But yeah, Julie was a bit of a freak. Well, she debuted for the Phoenix, which is like the Vixens back then, at age 16, and the Diamonds when she was 20. So she was a gun. She had a lot of injuries in the end. We're pretty good at getting injured, but yeah, she got Diamonds Player of the Year, and she often still gets mentioned as one of the best players of all time. So I'm a proud big brother of both of them. They're rippers.
When you talk about your 65 games and kicking off the shin, not much of a premiership preseason cup, and we've got a 20-year-old Australian player, one of the best ever. Surprised you didn't drop that. We just dropped off my sisters. We just dropped off my sisters at some netball game while I went and played football.
It sounds like we're well bred. Was mum and dad high level sports people?
Not high level. The old man talks himself up, but he's got an article, from when he grew up in Albury, from like an inter-school sports or something, where he's won every event. And that's like, he just holds that up to demonstrate how elite he was as an athlete.
What about mum? Was she elite? Anything?
She's a good netballer, good basketballer. Played until I can remember her playing when we were growing up in the country, and I was, nicking her juicy fruit out of her handbag. But she played a lot of sport. They didn't play at the elite level, but they were always really supportive. They talk about the amount of Ks you have to cover for them to drive you, and I guess growing up in a small country town, the perception probably was that they were pushy parents, but I don't remember them being like that. They're probably a bit too focused on outcomes. Second place is the first loser, that type of thing. But I'd do all the training myself and get out there and probably drag my sisters out. And Karen would do all the training with us. How's the names they've come up with? Ian, Karen, and Julie. So they weren't great at selecting kids' names, but they were really supportive. And then Julie she'd hardly do anything. It just came naturally to her. So we'd train our butts off for the 800, 1500 at the state champs, and Julie would choose the shot put, the 100 sprint, the 400, and the 800, and win 4 golds. So she just had that natural talent.
Well, sounds like Mr. and Mrs. Prendergast were doing something right.
Just not selecting names.
Well, Ian Prendergast, look, we did the intro at the start. We got ex-AFL footy player, lawyer, let's not forget about it, Players Association, nearly Hall of Famer, I would say. And now sports advisory, passing on your life knowledge to sporting associations in the country. I feel pretty privileged from the chat tonight, Big Paulie.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like, Ian, again, we don't 60-odd games at VFL, AFL level is certainly something to be proud of, but it feels like your impact on the game and sports in general will be far greater than your playing impact. So well done to you, and we wish you, of course, all the best going forward. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about it.
Thanks, gents. It's been a pleasure.
Well, Big Paulie, our first major star, I'd have to say, Wikipedia page. We got to start off early somewhere. Ian Prendergast, ex-Blues player, Player Association aficionado, brother of sister Julie and Karen, who had netball guns. There's one Diamonds player at age 20. We had to bring that back up at the end. And then doing some great work with sporting associations today. Impressive.
Absolutely impressive, and no doubt a star and a big name. But I reckon there's 7 other people before him who'd be a bit offended by you calling him the first big star, Ogre. But hey, everybody's got their place, and we go wide and far to find the great characters that surround us. we've had fishermen, we've had golfers, we've had barbecue cleaners, and now we're going right up the tree to a mover and shaker in the sporting world. And I could have spoken to Ian for hours, and I feel like that's when we know we're just scratching the surface. We're getting to the big questions. We're getting to the right people, Olga, when you sit here for nearly an hour and just want to keep going.
And he's a good man, Ian. And, guys have sort of described someone, could have a beer with him any day. And Ian is one of those guys. And look forward to having another beer with him in the future.
He did drop a few big names, Olga. There's some big names, and if we go back and listen to that, I tell you what, he's rubbing shoulders with some very, very high-powered and high-connected people. So maybe we can just, fly along on his coattails and maybe meet some of those people, and they could very well be our future guests.
And we would love to hear from our audience, as always, in regards to Ian, in regards to something else. I'd love our audience to send us some stuff to talk about on the show, Big Paulie, in an intro or outro, whatever that might be. And they can do that on our Instagram page, which is @Clueless, Ogre Big Paulie. Can't miss it. Send some stuff through, send some memes. We'd love to see it, and we'll bring it up if we think anything's worthwhile talking about, Big Paulie.
And the more you people do that out there, the less I have to talk, which, hey, that might be a good thing, Ogre. People might be flooding us with information to talk about, so that will shut me up, and I'm sure you'll be happy about that too, Ogre.
Well, I think it is the first show that you have not mentioned TikTok, so you're not allowed to go there. So I'm going to wrap it up now, and you've been listening to another episode of Clueless with Ogre and Big Paulie, and it's a good night from me.
And I'll mention TikTok next time, and we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to another episode of Clueless with Ogre and Big Paulie. Follow, like, subscribe, even leave a review. Do it all. We'd love to hear from you.